Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hanging with the Hammer. We're going to roll the intro. Well, welcome to Hanging with the Hammer. I see Nick Thomas left a message at 6 a.m. Having some technical things with Jim, but Jim's going to find his way in. I know this is going to happen today. We have jimflys2. He's going to be on with us. Jim Huwe, and I believe he's from Wisconsin. So we're going to talk, and I've been following his channel for at least 4 or 5 years. So looking forward to him popping in when he gets here, and I'm looking forward to more of you popping in when you get here. So, Jim, I got a microphone that time. Are you there?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
You can barely hear me? Barely hear me.
You.
All right, turn your volume all the way up. You and I are on live stream right now. So
can you hear me now?
I hear you a little bit. So
okay, let's
definitely
try the headset again.
Yeah, it's something with your settings, the way you got your settings set up. So check if you go into settings, if you can see camera mic, go into camera mic and go to audio. And make sure your audio is. Take off echo cancellation and stereo audio. Take those off.
Okay.
That's part of your problem right now. Probably the echo cancellation doesn't really work. Turn that off and turn off stereo audio. And let it adjust them. It's a little bit better. Can you hear me better? Can you hear me?
You're coming in. You're coming in pretty good now. Check 1, 2.
Yeah, you're breaking up badly. You're breaking up really badly. So,
okay.
I wish I could see your screen and know what your screen looks like. Hey, everybody who's on, I see 2 people leave questions or say hi. We're having technical difficulties today with this stream, but hopefully you'll all. Yeah, we'll get it, Jim.
Try this at all.
You're there, but you're kind of breaking up. It's weird. It's a strange breakup. I don't know what it is.
This is a drag.
It is a drag. Yes.
Standby.
I hear you on that. It is a drag this morning. Good morning, Keith Scott. Welcome to the show. Jim, I want to talk. I want to talk. I really do.
Hey, let's try that.
It's a little bit better. It's a little bit better, but it seems like we've got a delay or something. Something's going on.
Yeah. I don't know, man, what to say. It's got the auto adjust off.
Do you have a hardwired ears with a microphone? You have a hardwired set of ears with a microphone?
Yes. Stand by. Yes. Stand by.
Go ahead. I'll keep going. So we're waiting for Jim. Good morning, Randy Edwards. I know it's breaking up hard. It's hard to do. That's very much so. Apparently I'm on a speaker with him too because I can hear myself right now. So I can do things like mute his mic. That's interesting. I'll have to bring him back when he comes back on. But today I've got jimflys2, or Jim Huwe. He is with us today, and we're going to talk about drums and his drumming career and, our paths, our different paths. So it should be a fun show. Just technology is not fun all the time. So this is one of those times. So we're going to see what happens when he plugs in. All right. Okay. How about...
I think I have to use settings here.
That seems a little... No, still not.
One.
I don't know what the problem is. Good morning, Tate Bucky. Good morning, Tate. Good morning, Randy Edwards. Yep.
That's right.
I guess it's... Let's go back to settings and look at your audio settings. Do you have automatically adjust mic volume checked?
Yeah, try that once.
Oh, that's the best you were yet. That's the best. That's the best.
1, 2. Hey, well then we'll go with it.
That's the one right there. Leave it alone. That sounds the
All right,
best.
we're done. So
Welcome,
Tate's
Jim
here.
Flies
All
to
right.
Tate's here. All right,
So
guys.
welcome.
You know how this show works. Your question makes the show, and when you guys ask questions, we will go down some different roads. So, Jim, now that we're finally in, and we're here. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're sitting right now. You're in Wisconsin, I believe, right?
I am in Wisconsin in my drum studio, my music studio. Yeah, I'm in Madison. Well, I'm outside of Madison, Wisconsin. I live in a small town called Deerfield, but I commute into work every day. I work in a repair shop, musical instrument repair shop. Started playing at like 6, 7 years old. Did drum lessons on and off. Got into the middle school band in seventh grade, and just started playing. And by ninth grade, I was gigging. I was 15, and then went to the music school for music education, and then was completely saturated with playing constantly and all kinds of music and pretty high level, and kind of got burned out and thought, I'm not sure this is a lifestyle I want to try and sustain with playing music. So, and I knew I didn't really want to teach full time. So I said, let's take a change of course. And I could still play. So I went into musical instrument repair back in 86, 87, and kind of been doing that since, plus playing professionally, just not full time professionally.
That's awesome. And so, working at a music store and
Yeah.
repairing instruments, that keeps you with lots of people you interact with that are musicians. Has that helped you get a gig stream of like ways you
Yeah.
got gigs?
Yeah, it's been really good. There've been a number of jobs that I've gotten that way. Um, and it's not unusual for me to go to a rehearsal or a gig and have one of the trombone players say, "Hey, my slide needs work," and I'll go home with a couple of King 2Bs or something,
Yeah.
and and do things like that. But yeah, it's a network, and I kind of had this hunch back even in college. I said, how can I make working with my hands, which is what I love to do, and making music, which I love to do, how can I make them work together? And it just seemed like it might work and it might fit. It took me a few years to fall in love with the repair world, but ultimately I did. And I really enjoy my work. And yeah, sometimes I wish I was playing more, but
Yeah.
when you're working, especially in the summer, I'm putting in 50, 55 hours a week just to keep up, and I get pretty tired. I had a rehearsal last night and it was like, whoa. But
Yeah.
after being on your feet all day, all week, so
So you
I'm gonna
do a
turn
lot of
down this.
repairs for instruments during the summertime, the break between for the school instruments. I take it a lot of repairs for those.
Yeah, it goes nuts about June 1st. June 1st hits, and thereabouts when school's let out and the band directors just send all their stuff in. So I've got a ton of stuff, mostly just for cleaning, some dent work, things like that. And then, of course, summer is like around Wisconsin is, the only time they let us out because otherwise it's winter, right?
Right.
And that's when all the gigs are happening. So, it's kind of a tough time for the family too because it's like, well, now we won't see you until September, which isn't entirely true. I really do try and be cognizant of my family and their needs and desires, and I block out time and I don't take gigs certain weeks, certain
Right.
weekends,
Yeah.
just to do things with the family. But honestly, this last year or two, it's been kind of slow. So I just kind of ride with it. I do not beat the bushes for gigs. I do not do the hang. I don't go out to the jazz jams very often. Once in a great while, I might. But I don't know. I've never really dug that hang so much, partly because, the band that's hosting might be really great, then it's time for you to sit in, and then there'll be several people that really do not know how to listen, and it's like, well, what's the point here? So
Yeah, I've never been a guy that went to jam sessions either very often.
mm,
I could think of maybe one
yeah.
in my whole lifetime of playing that I went to. But I've had friends that go to jam sessions. They say, "Hey, come on down." It's like, nah, I don't want to hang. You know.
Yeah, there was a blues jam that used to go on in Madison, and you know, it was pretty sketchy. And I got up there, and there was a couple college kids that, yeah, they didn't really know how to play basic form, and it was kind of an embarrassment. And then there was another one that was a jazz jam, and there were some really capable players, but there was a few people that they didn't want to listen, and they were overplaying and not listening. And the piano player, whom I know very well, and he's top level kind of guy. He sometimes goes and plays smalls in New York.
Hmm.
Um, and he just got up and left the stage, and he's like, that was just cacophony. And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know what the deal is.
Wow. Well, guys, who's on the show right now? Who's hanging out with the stream? Hey, guys, Keith and Randy and Tate and whoever else is out there. Identify yourself. And if you guys have any questions, please ask questions. We're just going to talk about gigging and
Randy eyed.
growing up in the growing up through the 80s. I think you and I have a similar path. I mean, I think I'm a little older than you, just knowing how
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
over
50.
60. You're
I'm
56?
57.
Okay. Yeah, I'm 60. So I just turned 60 last year. So, I mean, I got a
Yeah,
couple years earlier. I got out of college, that kind of thing. But I think we had
right.
an interesting path. You did a discussion about joining the Musicians Union that was just like kind of hit home for me
Yeah,
because
yeah.
my early career in like my first band was a rock band in high school. And then I went
Mm,
to college and I started doing one off gigs with people. And I joined the Musicians Union and I got a gig with an accordion box player and a saxophone
yeah.
player. And we used to play weddings and I make $50 a night. You know, that was the union
Exactly.
scale. Union scale, you got union scale, you know. I remember doing
That's
this
right.
one gig with a piano player at a restaurant in Long Branch. It was called Yvonne's Rhapsody in Blue. And Yvonne said she'd pay me union scale. So, and Yvonne was a dancer and a singer in the 40s. And she had a little Slarelin kit out front on the dance floor that she would come up and play with you. But she only wanted a drummer she hired a drummer to play with the piano player. So the whole night
Yeah,
was brushes and rumbas and cha-chas and blah, 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 all that good stuff. You know, you had to learn how to play. And I played with the
yeah.
guy the whole night. And then she came up in the middle and we did a rumba thing and she was going off and I just had to kind of follow her. End of the night, she paid me $40, and I said to her, again, I said, well, this is Saturday night. This is that union gig. This is a $50 night. Needless to say, I didn't get asked to go back next week. I was
Yeah.
done. So it's like,
You gotta
sorry.
be you gotta be really careful. I remember when I was I was probably about 20,
Hmm.
and I was at the university and doing a lot of playing. I was in the top jazz band and everything. Actually got in my freshman year, and I had to audition twice because there was another guy I was up against who had amazing chops, but he didn't quite have as much big band experience because I was in a working big band my senior year in high school. So I got a lot
Hmm.
of experience. Anyway, I was gigging a lot in the local town and where I grew up and in the union and all that. And I got a call one morning, and I was still asleep, and I got a call about 8 o'clock or something. Typical college kid. I'm gonna sleep till 11 if I can. I get a call, wake up, I go out to the phone. I'm like, "Hello." He's like, "Yeah, this is Conrad. I've got a gig I want you to play on May 7th." And I said right away, I go, "What's it pay?" And he got really upset. Well, that's
Right.
a salty question to be asking a guy. Well, it was stupid of me to do that. I was also very foggy. But
Yeah.
normally, guys will say, "Hey, man, I got a gig. It's a tux gig. It pays $100. It's
Right.
this time. Everything, boom, boom, boom." He didn't do that, and unfortunately, I didn't work with him again. And I liked him. He was an older guy, but that was a faux pas on my part. But you live and learn. The funny
Yeah.
thing is I just got a call for playing this coming Thursday, the 8th, at a what's become kind of a jazz club, but they have all kinds of music. So the pay for the band is $150 for a jazz trio. All right,
Hmm.
it's 2021,
For the
and
whole
you and I
band.
were yeah,
The whole band.
plus yeah, plus 10% of the sales, which I think is probably a pipe dream,
Right.
plus tips. Well, tips are tips, right?
Right.
So we're talking 1979, 1980, maybe whatever you were talking about
Right.
getting $50. That's
Yeah.
what I was getting, $50. I think union scale at our local was maybe 45 for a 4-hour job, but normally
Yeah.
we got a little bit more than that.
Right.
But it hasn't changed. It's gotten worse if you include inflation.
No doubt about it. Matter of fact, I started getting gigs with guys in college doing weddings for 100, 150.
Yeah,
And that's when I dropped out of the union. I said, what am I going to be in the union unless I'm going to go work in New York City? You know what I'm saying? Because
exactly.
I'm not supposed to take these scab gigs,
That's
being a
right.
union member,
Right.
and I'm
Well,
making more money working in a band that's not union. So that became what I did. And the union lost its footing because of those kinds of
yeah,
rules. I mean, if you're in New
that's
York
right.
City, you're playing. I have a good friend who I actually have a bunch of friends that played in New York City, and I played in New York City a few times, but I never played at any shows, Broadway shows. And I have a good friend of mine who did Broadway shows for years. He had a pension and all that stuff from Broadway, and you had to play the game in New York City. That was a different ball game. But in New Jersey, the clubs were not hiring union musicians necessarily, and the wedding catering houses were not hiring union bands. They'd
No.
hire whoever to be their house bands. It didn't matter. So it really changed in the 80s, and then by the 90s the DJ thing came in and the gigs were
Yeah.
becoming less and less. And now if you're in a corporate band today, you can make some good money in a good corporate band, but there's not as many bands out there to play. So
Right.
it's a little
Yeah.
different world.
Yeah, that's a good point. We were talking the other day on the phone just to kind of get this all set up and talking about back in the day, every hotel had a lounge and every lounge had a band.
Right.
And I knew guys that were set up in lounges for months on end. And then there were other clubs that they would have a band for a week. I think they had one night a week off for the changeover, and that band would move out and go down the road 200 miles or 100 miles and set up someplace else, and a new band would come in, and there
Right.
was a rotation. So every 6 or 8 weeks you would see Vic and the Dynamics or whoever you know
Right. Yeah. That it was very
but
common. Every Holiday Inn had one. Every Holiday Inn.
but I did the same thing. I joined the union in '79 when I was 15, and I thought I was on my way to the top because I had read all the downbeat articles and Modern Drummer and all that. And I thought, well, this is going to be my ticket. Um, but if you played a wedding, it was union scale. But if you wanted to
Right.
play at the jazz club, the Civic Center Inn, we called it, or they called it, that was a jazz room, and that was $25 a man. So
Right.
you were making less at, but so that I finally quit, and the union president called me up because he was trying to do damage control because a lot of people were dropping, including my drum teacher and some other highly active players. And he's like, well, we're trying to get people to stay. I said, well, I mean, I want to play jazz and, that's not a union room. And, well, we're
Yeah.
working on them. We're trying. Well, unless you're in New York or LA or Nashville or a symphony player, it's kind of like you take what you're going to get. Even Jeff Porcaro talked about doing scab gigs.
Well, they all did scab gigs. All the great jazz players did scab gigs. Now, that's the truth of the matter. Hey, by the way,
Yeah.
hi to Martin Merdino. Drum covers by Bill. How's my volume, Marty? Thank you for saying that. Is it better now, or is it too loud? And hi, Eric F. Drums. Thanks for being on. Appreciate you guys all being here today. Your questions. I do got a question from Tate. Tate asked a question. He said, "Any gigs popping up for you guys as the summer progresses?" I'll start first because you just mentioned a pop up gig. The truth of the matter is, I'm just doing my normal church gig stuff, and I've been out of the. I moved from New Jersey to Florida in 2000, the end of 2000, and when I got down here, I did not get into the scene down here because the scene in Florida was completely different than New Jersey. New Jersey had a one-off scene, you know what I mean, where you could go do a one-off with somebody in sub gigs and fill-ins, and I did a lot of that in Jersey because that was the way it worked. But down here, you have to be in part of a band to get gigs. There's like very few one-off gigs down here. There's a lot of one-off musician gigs down here. So you'll have a guitar player playing with a computer and singing, and they may be terrible, but they get a gig, and they're making the two
That's
hundred
right.
dollars a night or $300 a night. but the idea of having a band is the only way you get gigs with bands. So I have chosen not to be in a band right now. I was in a band a couple years back, and just my work schedule, and then of course COVID and all the other things happened in my life. Kind of, it was time to kind of bury that for a while, and so I'm back to just playing my church gigs, and my studio and YouTube is all I'm doing for music right now. But if somebody called me up and said, "Hey, can you fill in?" I would love to do those kind of gigs, and I miss them desperately, you know. But go
Well,
ahead, Jim. Tell about some of your
I'll,
gigs.
I'll I'll tell you one thing. I mean, hats off to you for doing your YouTube thing. I think you've ramped up the whole drum cover thing
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit, especially now you're adding video. And yeah, it was actually you that finally made me to decide to jump and get a DAW. Because
Wow.
prior to that, I was just going into an Allen and Heath mixer
Mm-hmm.
and going into my camera, and I would play it, and I would be like, I'd tweak it, and then whatever I got is what I got.
Yeah,
Now I spend more time mixing rather than playing.
I
But
understand that.
my goal isn't so much as to do a ton of covers, is to do some. And it's like the repair videos have really taken off for me, and I've gotten a couple of them almost 1 million views, and they provide a little income. But no, to get back to it, is like you've really done a service, I think, to the drum community, and your personality is great. You're friendly, you're nice, and you want to breed a community, and that's really
Right.
cool. I take my hat off to you.
Well, thank you,
So
Jim.
thanks.
I appreciate. Thank you so much for saying that. I found you about 4 or 5 years ago, probably when I was before I started. Really, I
Hmm.
latched onto one of your videos and friended you at that point, and you had some really cool videos. I could tell you were a player, and I kind of like watching players. Guys that could play,
Yeah.
and you had like jazz chops, and I think the first one I saw you do was maybe I don't know if it was a Toto thing. I don't think it was Rosanna, but
Yeah,
there was something,
Rosanna, I just did last summer.
it might have been, was a Steely Dan. I can't remember. It was I found the video the other day when I was going through some of your videos. I found my first comment. Oh, I subbed,
It it
but
wasn't Oasis, was it? By
no,
Lee
no,
Ritenour? No, that was a
I don't
while
think so.
ago.
No,
Uh,
but the thing was, I knew you were a player, so following players or guys that had
Yeah,
really cool drum kits. I always like drum kits. If somebody's got
yeah.
like a really cool drum kit, like I'm gonna check you out for sure. I want to see that.
Well, over here I have a 22-inch Ludwig 66 kit, a
Wow.
68 or 9 Rogers 20. My Yamaha's over here with a 20-inch bass, and then my Gretsch kit is in my car because I'm going to a party this afternoon to play. A lot of players will be there, but
Yeah.
Tate asked the question about gigs. All right, so I've got a couple things. Like I said, this one thing just popped up. That's next Thursday. Then on August, and it looks like starting July 28th, they're going to try and have a regular jazz trio. So that might be starting up. And then like the 24th and 5th of August, I'm going to be at a jazz festival. Um, it's a beautiful old renovated barn that's actually a residence, and that's where I rehearse with one particular group, and it pays very handsomely. But it's a Token Creek music festival, and it's mostly classical. But they got a beautiful 9 foot Steinway in this barn. I'd like to say
Yeah.
it's fully heated and everything, and it's owned by a composer who lives out in Boston, John Harbison, and John's a very well connected 80s something year old guy, and his wife
Mm-hmm.
own that property. It's actually been in her family forever. So that's kind of a one of those festivals that's supported by a lot of people with money, and
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
you get 85 people in that barn on cocktail tables and everything, and that's a cool thing. And then I've got a couple things, I don't know, September, October, but mostly little freelance things. I've never been getting back to the whole idea of gigging and whatever. I've never been like a band guy. You were talking about
Right.
doing
Yeah.
one-offs. I love doing one-offs. I love schlepping my stuff into a place and setting up and going and leaving at the end of the night. Um, the band thing was always a little bit of a problem for me because I started as a just doing one-off things, so young. So getting into a rock band in high school would have probably been a little bit more a challenge to schedule all the time, because I was always freelancing. Now, I
Right.
was in a wedding band, and that was pretty regular, but we didn't rehearse regularly. I mean, we just played, and so that's
That's
kind of
very
how.
similar to what I dealt with. That's
Yeah.
very similar. You know, I didn't get into a
Now,
rock band because I was doing one-offs and club dates and weddings.
now
Same
you were
reason.
from Jersey City, is that right?
I went to Jersey City State College. That's where I
Okay.
studied music at. My
Yeah.
teacher, Nick Serrato, was a Broadway pit musician. And I studied
Yeah.
with a drummer named Richie DeRosa on drum set. Richie DeRosa's dad was Clem DeRosa, the famous, high school band director, writer of music for that.
Okay.
And Richie played with Jerry Mulligan. He was Jerry
Wow.
Mulligan's drummer, and he's a composer. And he teaches at, I think he teaches at Montclair State or William Patterson now, or whatever it is today, because
Okay.
they've changed all the names. Of I got now my college, my university is New Jersey City University because it was now it's a university, not a college. But
Okay.
back in that day, that's where I was. In Jersey City State College had one of those MMO records, those Music Minus One records. They did one
Hmm.
of those, and I actually
You know,
played
I
some of the songs from that. Go ahead.
I bought one of those at a thrift sale when I was like 15 or 16.
Yeah,
And one side was like Dixieland and the other side was more big band.
right.
And it had the charts and everything, and so I would like work on those. I'm like, "Oh, there's the place where you kick and fill in." And it was really great. So by the time I was doing high school jazz band, I was starting to get pretty familiar with it,
Yeah, that
listening.
helps your reading a lot. I didn't get my reading together till college. College was
Oh,
like I picked up everything by ear. I was a rock musician basically,
sure.
and then I went to Jersey City State and I started in the Podemsky book. I was supposed to start in the Cerrone book and I ended up in the Podemsky book. And I started with
Okay.
whole notes and half notes and then quarter notes, and so it was a whole 4 years of getting my musicality together in a different way and reading and stuff. And then I got
That's
out of
fun.
school and I had to play gigs where I didn't have any charts anymore, so you weren't reading
Yeah.
anymore,
It's
except
funny
occasionally.
because when I got into college, it was like I could read really well, but my mallets weren't good.
Oh
And
yeah,
I knew very little of music theory. I mean, I could tell you basically what a triad was, but I didn't. I mean, if you showed me a key signature, I'd be like, B
yep.
flat? No, it's E flat. Oh, okay. Uh, so I had to really woodshed, and I didn't do that great, subsequently. However, I didn't do great letter wise, but I did absorb a ton of material that I still remember, and I've grown in that quite a bit. But there was clearly a point of, and you gotta either do this or not.
Right.
I was there strictly for avocational purposes, and what I mean by that, or I'm vocational purposes, and what I mean by that is I was there to meet players, do as much playing as possible, and if I happened to fall out of the whole thing with a degree, great. But I was playing in percussion ensemble, marimba ensemble, jazz one, and concert band. And if you were in concert band, you were going to be in the marching band in the fall. So I
Right.
had like all ensembles. I had like two academic classes my first semester. It was crazy.
That was the whole thing about being a music major. A music major, you
Yeah.
started freshman year and you never stopped. It's like the whole
Right.
time you were there, you were taking classes. My
Yeah.
Our school did not have a marching band because we didn't have a football program at the time.
Mm.
Had a basketball program. So it was concert band or symphonic band. Of course, there was the
Right.
choirs that you had to be in, which I was terrible at. By the way, that's how I got my recording career started in concert in the college choir because I had such a bad pitch at that point in time, and the choir director thought I was unsavable. So he said you can work the tape machine for the concert. So I ran the
Wow.
tape machine with the two microphones pointing at the group. I wasn't allowed to sing. Then I joined
Wow.
men's choir, and then he let me sing, which was I was like, he's gonna let me sing. I thought I didn't have any pitch. I couldn't hear things. I would find out that I could hear, you know, but I was really discouraged. I don't know how I got through college. I mean, the ear training side of it was really tough. The theory side really got me, and I somehow got out of there with a
Yeah.
degree. But it
Yeah.
was mostly I didn't get in the jazz ensemble because that was didn't have those chops, and but I did play for some of the shows. I did Grease, and I did Three Penny Opera, and there was some jazz theory classes and stuff, and like those kind of
Yeah,
things that I took. So we had some like jazz ensemble playing that was not the band, because the band was big. It was a big deal. I had
yeah,
good friends that got in it, but let's take a couple questions and then we'll jump back in. This question's from Eddie
yeah.
Edwards one. Hammer, how is the drum balance in church versus singers? Sound shell or electronics? Do you play softer? Well, let me tell you about my. Do you play in church, by the way, Jim? You do any church playing? I
Not
know
very
you.
often.
No,
I go to church regularly.
right.
No,
I
but
know that. I
I
know.
yeah, yeah. I occasionally will do something with my family,
Hmm.
and I play guitar a little bit too.
Okay.
It's more of a pipe organ
Right.
setting and piano, so
So you got a
not really.
more traditional type church than the
Yeah,
rock
definitely. It's
churches of
definitely
the day.
more of a
Yeah.
traditional worship, liturgical, hymnal, that very Bach,
Right.
oriented,
Yeah.
um, which is kind of cool because it's like the opposite of my musical personality. Like
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
about improvising, but I go to a church thing and it's like it's very metric.
Right.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Well, let me answer this question. It's really
Yeah.
simple. I've played in the churches where I've been in the penalty box, with the in-ear monitors and the Avion systems, and the click tracks. I've done a lot of that playing in the especially last 10 years. And I've done a lot.
Hmm.
My most of my freelance work has been churches down here. That's what I've done. People will call me to do one-offs at churches for people. Like, oh, the drummer can't come in. We heard, can you come play for us? In the last 4 years, I've stopped doing the one-offs. I got tired of doing. For about 10 years, I was doing one-offs a lot of churches, and I played at a couple of churches, kind of pretty steadily. But the church I'm at now is a Presbyterian church. It's a wooden structure. We
Hmm.
play with just speakers in front of us and two floor monitors, and you have to adjust your volume to play in the room. So it's kind of like
Right.
playing a jazz gig. It's like playing those gigs I used to play when in the '80s, and you didn't have in-ear monitors, you didn't have click tracks, you weren't dealing with that stuff. If you had floor wedge monitors, you were lucky. That was a good gig when you had that, so you could hear a little bit better. And I'm fine playing those kind of gigs, without
Yeah.
microphones on the drums and stuff. But I've done plenty of gigs where I was in the booth and they got me all mic'd up. And I hate electronic drums. I have done that a few
Yeah.
times, and
Yeah.
they're not my favorite way to worship or play drums in,
Yeah.
that
I,
scenario.
some years ago. Oh man, it must have been, I don't know, 92 or 3 probably. I
Hmm.
was asked to do more of a contemporary thing, and I was like, yeah, okay, because I'd done some of that, and when I was living in Ohio, I was very very into kind of the whole CCM scene, and went to a lot of shows, a lot of concerts.
Hmm.
Met Rick Kua, actually called him up. He was looking for a sax for his niece,
That's funny.
and he's living in Nashville, and he can't find a saxophone, and I'm in Central Ohio at the time, and I
Wow.
said, I can get you a sax, Rick.
Yeah.
So I called him up. His wife answers like, yeah, just a minute. So I'm talking to Rick about, buying the sax for his niece, and he wound up not doing it, I guess. But anyway, I was asked to do a gig, and so I went there, and it was like, it's pretty quiet, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I've done a lot of gigs where you have to be quiet. I've got the brushes, and I'm playing like Russ Kunkel,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh no, it's still too loud. I'm like, do you really want drums on this, or do you just think you want drums? Because it
Right.
just didn't seem to be like they didn't know what, and that's the other thing. Not to diss on anybody, but a lot of times, you're coming at it from a freelance player. You can step into almost any situation and make it comfortable.
Right.
And a lot of times, amateur musicians, they would never know the form of a song like
Hmm.
singers. I mean, that's
Right.
even a problem with people that say they're jazz players or jazz singers, and they really don't understand AABA.
Right.
Um, and it just, I find that distracting then for me. So then my whole thing, even being there, I find my frustration level coming up, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably better for me to not. But Yeah, you got to adjust yourself in any situation. I've done some cantatas where I'm playing percussion or drum set, and that's been kind of fun.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
Yeah,
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 you've got so you've done some classical and you've done
yeah,
some yeah.
a little bit.
My mallet playing left me at college. Even though
Yeah,
I had a
I am.
friend who was talking about having a marimba the other day, and I hanging around, and I was like, that sounds interesting. I don't think I have room for it in my studio, but it'd be nice to get back into playing marimba again.
Well, well, I was asked when I first moved to Marion, Ohio. It's north of Columbus, about an hour. Um, I was asked, I'm working in a music store, and somebody said, "Hey, you should check out the Marion Players Theater." And it was like a beautiful theater, and you play musicals. And I'm like, okay, so they needed a percussionist. I'm like, you got anything for drum set? No, well, we got a drum set player. He's the repairman at the other store in town. I'm like, okay, so it was 42nd Street, and they gave
Hmm.
me the book, and I'm like, okay, I'll have to get a marimba, and I practiced it. I shredded on it, but it wasn't easy for me.
No.
And the thing is the drum set player, he was not happening whatsoever. He was not good. He couldn't play. And I'm getting my way through the mallet parts, but eventually I worked on in playing the drum set parts in a lot of those pit orchestra gigs, which wasn't my favorite form of music because I don't like sitting there 63, 2, 3, 4, bump,
Yeah.
get a magazine out. Oh, do chat, do chat, do chat, do chat, do chat, stop, bomb.
Yeah.
No, I
No.
just I like to play 4 hours and be done.
Yeah. Well, it's the Broadway thing is a whole different thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And Broadway today has become, with some of the music they do, if it's not a
it's
traditional old Broadway, it's some
no,
pretty complex
no,
stuff, they're doing.
yeah.
I have a
Uh,
couple friends that do that stuff, so I know. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
yeah, I've got a guy that was he's also from Wisconsin, and we in college we went to his school that he was going to, a small school in southwestern Wisconsin. And I talked to this kid and I said, "You've got some really good drumming skills. You should consider this. I mean, if you wanted to do this, you have that kind of talent."
Right.
And by golly, he went on. He's like an on Broadway guy, and he's like very thankful. Oh, you were my idol, because he came to the school then
Right.
after I'd left, and he would, oh, I listened to all the recordings you were on, and you were my inspiration. I'm like, well, that's really nice. But now Larry is he's a Broadway fixture, and
That's
doing
wild.
great.
What's his name?
Yeah, isn't
Larry
that
what?
something?
What's his last name?
Larry, shoot, now you got me on the spot.
Sorry about that.
Let me think.
I think I know who you're talking about, though. That's why I asked that question. Well, you think about
Yeah,
why I say hi to
he
Paolo.
was in modern.
Who you're talking about? I know you're talking. He was a modern drummer. You're saying.
Yeah, he always wears
Yeah,
a like
Larry.
a
Yeah, that's
shoot. What's
interesting.
the deal?
I can't remember his
Yeah, Larry.
name. I'm sure my friend knows him. I'm sure of that.
Dang it, dang it.
Positive.
Yeah, he
But
was playing the producers a couple years ago. That was a big musical.
yeah, let me say hi to a couple of friends that are on.
Sure.
CCM drummer I missed before. Bill Morehouse. Thank you for dropping in, Bill. Bill usually watches Ask Girl Anything. Um, and want to say hi to Paolo, who just drops in because he doesn't know anything about drums, but he likes listening to us talk. Well, thank you, Paolo. I do appreciate that.
Mm.
Tate Berkey had another comment. He said, I love pit gigs. I have one coming. I know you told me you got a gig playing in a pit again this summer, Tate. So Tate does some Broadway
Tate
style drumming.
Tate's
Tate's a
got a
great.
very
Go ahead.
yeah. He's got a very Tate. You have a very rich musical background. I can hear your brushwork and doing the bassy stuff, and the complex stuff like Night Sprite you did. That was fantastic. You've got a very bright musical future. I would say you're 24, 5, maybe 26 years old. I don't know, but
I think he's
yeah, I
younger.
mean,
He's
you're
younger.
younger than that. Well,
Yeah.
see, you've got a lot of background already, and you remind me a lot of where I was at one point, and just pursuing that all. Uh, Word to the wise, don't get burned out. I was taking
Yeah.
everything and I was playing a lot of stuff that was just not cool. And I was doing it somewhat for the money and somewhat because like I was the guy to ask. And if you don't take gigs, they stop calling, right? So
Yeah.
Just
Well,
don't get burned out.
that was the trapping of it, and it's Larry Lely. Does that make
Lely,
sense?
Lely,
Lely,
yeah,
Lely, yeah,
Larry
okay.
Lely. Yeah, Larry's
Lely,
he's from Kickapoo High School in southwestern Wisconsin.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
you're right about getting burnt out. I'm gonna tell you a story about a guy I met. I don't remember his name. He went to I met him on an airplane. I was flying home from Seattle, Washington, back in early 2000s, and this guy went to University of Indiana,
hmm.
and he was like the top percussionist in the class where Kenny Arnold was in the class.
Oh
He was
yeah,
the top percussionist. He ended up in I think the San Francisco Symphony. He was doing symphony gigs. He was the hot shot coming in. He was the best guy in the school. And he kind of said something funny about Kenny Arnold. You know what I mean? Like Kenny Arnold was like
yeah,
way down there, you know. But
yeah,
I'm sitting next to him in first class because I got bumped from the back to first class because I had status at that point. And I'm sitting next to him, and I said to the flight attendant, I said, "Oh, I left my magazines in 20C or whatever heck I was in." He goes, "Oh, we'll go get them for you." She came back, and it was Modern Drummer and Sound on Sound, and I was had a
yeah,
studio at the time, and he goes, "Oh, are you a musician?" I said, "Yeah, I do that. You know, I'm a drummer." And he goes, "Oh, you're a drummer." And he told me this whole story. And his whole story ended at 25 years of age. He quit everything, sold
yeah.
all his instruments, and stopped playing.
No,
He had achieved everything he needed at 25. He was done.
yeah,
And
yeah,
see, that's never been my life. I've always been like striving to get better my whole life. Like from
yeah,
college, I got out, get gigs, try to get more gigs, work gigs, play with better musicians,
yeah,
play with not so much better musicians. You know, learn how to play with all different levels, play all different styles of music, and I'm still that's been my goal, and that's where I'm at. And I'm just
right,
having fun being able to play with great musicians because the
yeah,
extract stems and take the drummer off
right.
and I put Earl
Yep.
Bennett on there instead of Jeff or somebody else. So you know,
Yeah, it's isn't it funny? It's like I think part of this is our own fantasy, you know. It's a new
right?
performance medium, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
like when we were growing up, there was the freelance gigs, and now that doesn't really exist. The club gigs are way different. And now we've got YouTube, and it's like, hey, this would be my take if it were me, maybe.
Right.
Um, yeah, and you got to understand too, we do idolize Jeff and Russ Kunkel and some of these people that played on everything, Jim Gordon,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
but you know that out of 8,000 recordings or whatever they've done, probably 7,000 of them were pretty lame. I mean,
Yeah.
Jeff walked out of a Barbara Streisand session.
Yeah.
He would call Mike Baird. He'd be like, this isn't for me," and he'd call Mike Baird and stuff. So yeah, you got to be careful. The burnout thing can really be a serious deal. Here's the thing. So in '85, I mean, between 1983 and '85, I'd played with Milt Hinton, Ashley Alexander, Ernie Watts, Don Menza, Bill Berry, all these like amazing people that were clinicians, and they'd come in and we'd play together. And I'd seen all these great concerts, but by the time and opened a show with Stevie Ray Vaughan with this horn band I was in, and we got to meet and hang out with Chris
Yeah.
Slayton and Tommy Shannon and Stevie and all those guys. Well, by the time '85, and that was December of '85, when December of '85 finished, I said every band I was in, I said, you guys, I'm going to take a pause, and I literally packed up my Ludwig kit, put it in the basement in the cases, and I stopped for a month.
Wow.
And everybody's like, "What's happening? Are you quitting? Are you quitting?" I'm like, "I'm just taking a break. I am so burned out." And I got right back into it, but I also knew that I needed to pursue something that was going to feed my other needs, which,
Right.
if you're just music only, um, you'll discover that either you're very narrow in your needs or you will, just find that I need something to distract me. I don't think you can do just one thing and be completely satisfied. I can't. I mean, I can't. I would never be able to play in a rock band and that's it. I
Right.
would never be able to probably play in a jazz trio and that's it. I just
Yeah.
need so many diverse experiences. So I do a Latin jazz gig with a group called Mambo Blue. Um, do some big band work. when their founding drummer isn't in town. But yeah, you got to be careful of the burnout.
Well, I think the diversity, playing a lot of diverse styles, was something we were taught. That's how you become a
Yeah,
working musician. I mean,
that's
that
right.
was what was preached to me by my teacher. He
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
played jazz gigs, but he played club dates and weddings. And he was the guy that threw me on a country gig when I had no business being on a country gig. I never played one in my whole life, and he threw me at
yeah.
one.
I
Yeah,
remember that story.
yeah. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that really made you a musician because you had to get in there and you were thrown into these situations. I remember the first
Yeah,
time I did an organ trio gig, or it was an organ duo gig, and I
yeah,
didn't sing, but I just had to play for this guy, and it was the whole night was him going shuffle, cha-cha, rumba, whatever it
yeah,
was, and we kind of lock in.
yeah.
And that having an ear to play anything, that's why I do drum covers the way I do. It's like I pick stuff up fast and I play it. And I get bored if I'm trying to be exact for days and weeks. I could never do that.
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
make me happy. It makes me more happy to kind of like figure out how to play this song like I would on a gig and how I would get through it and not flub
Hmm.
it. Because
Yeah.
you may make a little flub here and there, but you cover for yourself. And the great musicians always turn those mistakes into that's now it's part of the song.
Right.
It's like
Right.
Steve Gadd said on that In Session tape.
Yeah.
They were playing down that samba tune. I listened to this
Yeah.
tape forever, that DCI tape,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're doing that samba song, and all of a sudden they go into the dum 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 da dum 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 dum, and all of a sudden Steve goes, they're rehearsing, and he says, when you drop a bar out, it becomes part of the song, and he was like, right, that's what it was on a
Yeah.
jazz gig or on a rock gig or a blues gig in a club where somebody dropped something. It was like, well, we dropped it, but we got back in and we're there. And how many gigs that happen to you?
It's
It's yeah,
all listening. Exactly. It happened last night at the rehearsal. It's like we got this thing charted out, and people were adding a bar to this like second ending of this particular arrangement, and it was just the natural thing to feel, because there was a particular figure that when it's played, it sounds like a pickup into a new phrase,
right,
but it's 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 actually the beginning of the phrase, not a pickup into it. So it's a deceptive thing. But if everybody listens, and I think that's the difference between a young player coming up and someone with seasoning, and you can only get that by doing a lot of gigs where you have to be on performance mode and not rehearsal mode.
right,
Um, listening, and then just not playing when you don't need to play.
yeah.
I've got a question for the audience, and maybe Tate. What are your what are your guys' goals for playing? I mean, I'd be curious to see what that is. My percussion instructor in college was Ron Keyser. Now, Ron Keyser is Jeff Keyser's dad. Jeffrey Keyser is an incredible pianist. He's a New York-based guy, and he
Hmm.
he was playing with all well, he was playing with Art Blakey in
Oh
1990.
wow,
Yeah,
wow.
Jeff is an amazing talent. Jeff, when he was 3 years old, was playing, on the piano, uh, musical ideas that made sense. When he was 13 years old, and I was a sophomore or freshman in college, he was writing for our percussion ensemble, and he'd have this crazy like 15, 16 time. Like here's a measure of 15, 16, and we're like, Mr. Keyser, how do you play that? He goes, I don't know. And then he'd bring Jeff in, and Jeff would be like, no, that's not right. And he goes, can you play it? And well, you shouldn't write it if you can't play it. It was so funny, but extremely talented. I got a recording actually of playing with Jeff when Jeff was 15 and I was
Wow,
21, and no, I was 20. Yeah, I was 21, and it's
sure,
he was definitely making the changes. I mean, it didn't take long, and he was like, you weren't going to touch him.
yeah,
He was just too amazing. Anyway, Jeff's dad, Ron, was my percussion teacher, and his whole thing was all around percussionist. If you get a call with the ice capades, you got to be able to go in and play the marimba parts and this and this and this. Consequently, and everybody told me, you'll never learn anything about drum set with him. And he
right.
was right. He's a fantastic drum set player, but he didn't teach it.
So he taught you all the percussion instead. That's
Yeah, and
interesting.
then one time he came up to me on a gig I was playing, and it was an on night. I was feeling great. He came up to me on a break, and he goes, "Hey, come here." And I'm like, "Yeah, hey, how you doing, Ron?" And he's like, "What the blank are you doing? You sound a blankety blank." And he started cussing me out. And I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "You sound like you're Gene Krupa up there." He's like, "You got to get hip. You got to start listening to Tony. You got to start." I'm like, "Well, man, I'm listening to Max Roach and Art Blakey, and well, you gotta start getting it together." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm in my second year here and my third or fourth semester in Jazz One, and this is the first time you decide to talk to me about my drum set playing."
Wow.
It was kind of a ball buster, and I was like offended, but I'm like, okay, let's start working on drum set, and so he did, and then it was not that inspirational. It was like, well, let's work out a four-way coordination, and to me, those exercises in four-way, although they're good, they're not particularly musical.
Yeah.
I
No,
always,
I
I
I hear what you're
yeah,
saying. Yeah.
you have to put them in a musical context, and that's the way I teach when I do one-on-one teaching. If you can't apply it after you leave, it's just an exercise in mechanics, and I don't think that's necessarily good. It could be valuable, but I want to be a good player and a supportive player
You
anyway.
know, I think when we're younger, we don't know how to apply those things. I just pulled out a
Right.
book. I think it's like Get Your Fills Together or something. I forget who wrote
Yeah,
the
yeah,
book.
I think
You have that
right.
book? You know that one?
I
And
don't have it, but I remember that.
yeah, and it's got all these like 5 stroke rolls, 7 stroke rolls on the floor tom, snare drum, and small tom. You know, and I've been going through it, and I'm like going just the mechanical things. You know, it's good just to read once in a while, do something weird like that. Like I'm actually admitting I'm practicing now to everybody here. So you guys, like, I tell you how much I don't practice. In the last few months, I've been goofing around with books. But in the process of doing that, I started to go, oh, I hear the melodies now. I'm hearing the melodies in these the way it's written, and it's phrasing it a certain way. And I'm going, I
Yeah,
use these phrases and I didn't even realize that it's in this book that I don't practice, but I probably looked at a couple times because I heard other guys playing those phrases. Because that's where a lot of jazz has got 5 stroke rolls, 7 stroke rolls, 6 stroke rolls, you know, Radabacues. That's all Gaddisms. I mean, that's what he does. He
yeah,
does all that
that's right.
stuff and turns, then he inverts them and does other strange stuff to them. And
Right.
you know, so when you pick up an old book, sometimes you discover a couple diamonds in there, and you go, oh wow, this is kind of good to kind of get my head in a different place.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly
um,
right.
let's talk about Andy Edwards' one question. He says, can you guys talk about open handed drumming? Is it worth pursuing for younger players? And have you both tried it?
Yeah.
So, what's your take on it, Jim?
I'm doing it lots more than I ever did. If you watch some of my videos, you'll see I crash a lot on the left. So I feel what it does is it helps to balance you out. Now, I had an R&B horn band gig in college, and the guy that took over for me that I actually helped find for the band was a left-handed drummer. Well, I would go back and I'd sit in with the band, and I'd just sit down with his drum set, and I would play his left-handed kit. And it made me think a little bit more with my bass drum, because that was, leading with the left foot then. But it's always kind of been with me. Back in '86, I took one lesson with Gordy Knudsen,
Hmm.
and up in Minneapolis. Gordy, fantastic guy. I still have the right down there. I have a video cassette because he said, "Bring a video cassette and you can record your lesson."
Wow.
So that was cool. But he talked about Eric Gravatt up in the Twin Cities being a really top-notch jazz player, and he's always using his left hand. Back in the day, nobody talked open-handed. It was you're ambidextrous or you use your left a lot. I don't
Right.
recall the term open-handed until the last 5 years.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think they said that about Simon Phillips or Billy
no,
Cobham.
Billy
You know.
Cobham was like he's ambidextrous.
Yeah.
Uh, Kenny Aronoff. It was like when I saw him at Zildjian Day '83 in Chicago, he was like, playing hi hat with his left hand. It's like,
Right.
wow, well, that's kind of cool. So I started doing it just to try it, and I'm like, well, this might be good to kind of like level me out, so I'm not so right hand crash everything. but
Yeah.
use your left hand. And sometimes on a jazz gig, I will ride with my left hand on my left ride or
Wow.
crash ride. But I try not to practice too much on a gig. I try to stay in the music, but sometimes I will do it just to. Sometimes it opens your phrasing in a different way, so you start phrasing and comping in a different manner. So I will ride and spang-a-lang on the left hand, but not a lot, just
Hmm.
enough to kind of, I don't know, help balance things out maybe. So
That
I
that's
think it's worth pursuing for sure. Pursue it, do it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was a younger drummer today, I would
yeah,
definitely pursue it. It's hard to
yeah,
teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak. I
yeah,
remember when I
yeah.
first time I brought a used a double kick pedal. It was like falling down a flight of stairs. It just made no
Right,
sense to me. I was like, I have to relearn how to play the whole instrument. But I
right,
will tell you, in the last 3 or 4 years, especially after the John Robinson lesson I took a year ago, he said your left side really needs to be worked on. I've been focusing more on my left side, so I've been trying to play some patterns open-handed, but you just don't see it on my YouTube videos because I don't think
right.
I don't have the feel
No,
on the left hand. It just doesn't
yeah,
feel
right,
like that slinky lopey thing that I do on hi hat. I mean I play
yeah,
hi hat a certain way, and it's
right,
part of my feel, and I know it. And like when I see guys just playing and it's like all the same volume, it's not what
yeah,
I play because I haven't played
no,
that way in forever. It's how I
yeah,
ghost notes on the snare drum. It's like I ghost them in a way that you might not even write it in the music, but they're there. I'm
right.
dropping them in. That's the way I hear it because that's I listening to the Garibaldis and the Jeffs and those other guys that did those things, the Bernards. So
And
go ahead.
yeah, Randy, I would definitely pursue it, but I wouldn't make the pursuit of the mechanics the utmost in pursuits. I would make the pursuit feel and comfort and groove and be a supporting player. Um, I mean, I look at my job is I'm using my gift so that others can use their gift to the utmost capability. And it's my job to support them. And occasionally, if I'm throwing a solo, fine. If I don't get a solo all night on a jazz gig, I frankly don't care.
Yeah.
Um, I never refuse them
Hmm.
because I feel like it always challenges me to explore. And sometimes I'll be like, "You're giving me a solo on this? Why would you do that? You're just not thinking." But
Yeah.
I'll do it. You know.
Yeah.
It's like a ballad. Why would I do a solo on a ballad? Come on.
Yeah.
you know,
No, I hear
you
you.
know.
No, definitely. Yeah, pursue it. I would say pursue it for younger players
Yeah.
and I'm going to keep working on it in my own strange way,
Yeah.
but it's very hard
Sure.
after 45 years playing one way. It's really hard to turn certain
Yeah.
things around. But if you're not trying, then you're not learning. So
Right.
be a lifetime learner. I'm a lifetime
Yep.
learner.
Yep. This last few years, I've really fired up and I'm actually excited about practicing and I want to practice. In some ways, I have to practice. Now, I got that gig for that um, Diane or Barbara Streisand uh, impersonator, and it's like
Hmm.
I definitely wanted to look that music over because I knew there was a lot of Broadway type stuff in there and some time changes and everything. And I want more. I used to just like to wing it, just go into a gig completely cold and say, okay, what do we got? Now I want to be a little more prepared. And I think it's just speaking to the level of professionality I want to come out. It's not that I couldn't, but if I know it can be better by looking at it, I'm going to want to look at it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I like doing the winging it gigs when you're working with
yeah,
musicians that winging it is acceptable.
yeah.
But a
Right,
lot of the
right.
music today, like I did this I was supposed to do a Shania Twain gig. I'll put it that way.
Cool.
The problem, it was a Shania Twain cover band. I was filling in for my friend. It was all with clicks. It was all arrangements. I was
Yeah.
triggering, starting the songs and everything else. So
Wow.
I did like 3 rehearsals with this band, unpaid, which was ridiculous. And we were doing an
Mhm.
outdoor gig, okay? And the outdoor gig day came and it rained and I didn't get paid for nothing at that point. Except
Oh,
for the one extra rehearsal they dumped on me because they fired almost the whole band before we did the gig. I mean, there was a band that was riddled with problems, and I'm dealing with it. But I learned 18 songs cold. I learned all of them. I learned all their music, learned all their charts, learned all their clicks,
Wow.
learned, I never got to use it. So I
Yeah.
became a Shania Twain, person.
Stand
Like
in.
yeah, and it's in my head. So like, I can still probably play half the gig. If you turn that music on, things would come back to me just because I worked on it for a while.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
that level of working on it, I don't mind doing those gigs if they're going to work, like the church stuff. Again, you have to work on it. You come in. I have friends that tell me I'm the most prepared guy on the bandstand. And usually that's what you go to church and I'm like, I know the music cold. I know everybody's parts
Right.
and when people are flubbing things. And that's why when worship leaders give it to me, you're like, oh, you missed this part. You're supposed to do this. Just yanks the heck out of me. It's like, you know, it's like, why aren't you picking on that bass player who's just not missing all the notes? You know what I mean? And nobody's really setting us up with quarterly, so I know where we're at. Because I hate
Right.
counting. I don't know about you. Do you like? I'm not a counter. I like hearing that harmonically what's going on. Sometimes some music you can't help but count, but
Right.
church
Yeah.
music, church music today is like the same four chords, and they,
Right.
all of a sudden the chorus changes one, flips the D and the A flip, like so we'll start
Yeah.
with an A instead of the D, but you don't
Right.
even realize it because the way it comes in, and
Yeah.
unless you hear that part that basically leading notes into it, you don't know you're there. Well, when nobody on the bandstand's playing those leading notes, guess what? It's the drummer's responsibility to know you're supposed to change the tempo there, or change the
Uh,
groove there. It's
yeah.
crazy.
You're
So
a better man. You're a better man than I. I
yeah,
couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle that.
yeah. Well, I've done enough of it, so I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So,
You're a pro,
but
man.
yeah. Welcome, Mass Drummer and Sean Woodley and Dirk. And CCM Drummer said he worked on it for 6 months, open-handed playing,
Yeah.
and then he transitioned. And I got to commend you, Matthew, on your effort. That's what it takes. So, any of you guys have any other questions you want to talk about? Let's talk about. Here's what I want to talk about, Jim. Let's talk about your
Yes.
gear. You alluded to some of your gear. Um,
Yeah.
what? Give us a picture. Oh, your Peisty 1000 Rude Bottom Sound Edge.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've been using that somewhat lately.
Have you
I
with?
got with a oh, we're flipping out here, literally with believe it or not, with the light PST7 top.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you're
that's a
one of the
light.
guys. You're one of the guys that said to me, PST7s. Check them out. So,
I
did you get the
love
whole
them.
box? Did you get the box set?
No, I bought them first. I heard Rob Brown, and Rob's great. I mean,
Yeah, he's a great player.
he's a fantastic player, and he's a Peisty freak. And I've always been a Zildjian guy, but I've never been against Peisty, and of course I love Bonham and everything he did, and that sound. There's a certain sound to the Peisties. So Rob was talking about, if you ever want to get into Peisty, check out these PST7s. They won't set you back too far. And
Yeah,
he had this wonderful light 18 or thin 18-inch. And I think Terry also on
Terry Keating.
Bonzoli, yeah,
Yeah.
Terry Keating, he was talking about this thin Peisty 18. I'm like, wow, that is a nice symbol. So I went onto the Peisty site and I was like playing all their crashes because I thought, I think I'd like another crash, an 18, because I have an old Zildjian 18 from the 60s,
Hmm.
and it's getting a little bit ratty sounding for some reason. But anyway, um, I was like, wow, that's a really nice symbol. Out of all of those, I really like that one. So I ordered one up and got it brand new. And then played that for a while. I'm like, yeah, I like it. So a few months later, I started checking out the hi-hats and I'm like, heavies, no way. The regulars, not crazy about them, but the lights, I really like the lights. So I bought a used pair of light PST7s from a guy in Ohio for $105. Good
Wow.
deal.
Yeah, it is a
And
good deal
then,
for the whole set.
yeah, and
Yeah.
for that yeah, for a set of hi-hats. And then there was another the next thing was a light ride, this 20-inch light ride, and I'm like, I love that symbol. That's great. And so I'm like, okay. So then I bought a 19 thin crash. I like the thin ones.
Yeah.
And so I basically got a whole set. And then more recently, I just picked up the 20-inch regular ride. So I've got this Peisty collection that has grown from me being like mostly Zildjian and K's to being like the PST7 representative of the area. And I don't know if I like that regular ride yet. I've got to find the right song for it. I used it on one of the covers I did recently. It might have been Jeff Beck's Because We've Ended as Lovers, I think, is the one I
Okay.
used it on. And I'm just not sure that it was. There's a certain overtone that's kind of keeps hanging on that I'm not sure works on a ballad like that. But anyway, um, I here okay, so here's the thing, I'm like I don't have them all with me right now, but I've got like a Carope that I love and I used it on jazz gig. Very dark, very blendy. But now
Right.
last night I took sometimes I'll take a couple of like I've got a Peisty 22-inch traditional that I like to use too. But last night at the rehearsal, I took the 20-inch Carope and I put up the 18-inch thin crash PST7. And that was a beautiful combination because that's so crystal clear, but I love the buttery feel of the PST7s.
Right.
And they kind of open up, wow. And that was nice. And then for the bottom on this jazz gig, I've been using the PST7 bottom light hi-hat set, but on the top, I've got an Agazarian top. And the Agazarians are like Wuhans. In
Yeah.
fact, they're probably made by the same people. And I just found them at Guitar Center one time, and they were $80, so I picked up this pair of hats. But trying different combinations, the best sound that I get that gets this kind of old trashy kind of jazz sound is the Augustarian top, PST7 bottom on the bottom.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah,
You
it's
definitely are
crazy.
eclectic. I mean, I have some Caropes. I actually
Yeah.
have a 22-inch Carope and a 19-inch
Ooh,
Carope. And yeah, I
nice.
bought that at Maxwell's Drum Shop in New York in
Yeah.
2014 when the first year they
Okay.
came out. So I think I got one of the
Yeah.
early ones too. And
Yeah.
I was supposed to do this session for this guy about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, from Miami, and he gave me this set of Caropes as kind of a down payment. I would do the sessions for him. Well, he's bailed
Oh.
on me, and he calls me and goes, "I'm bailing on you. Do you want the Caropes?" I said, "Well, I thought you gave me the Caropes." And he goes, "Well, I'm kind of hard strapped for cash." He goes, so I said, "All right, well, I'll give you $300. That's what I'll give you for them." So I gave him three
Ah,
hundred
okay.
bucks and paid him off, and now they're mine. So I have a set of 14-inch
Nice.
Caropes too. But
My my
you know,
Carope 20 cost me $422. So you
oh,
did a
I know.
good job.
Well, the 22 cost me $465.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the most I ever spent on a ride cymbal my whole life.
Same. Same.
I'm
Same.
not a guy who likes to spend a lot of money on cymbals. I
Yeah.
spend money on cymbals because I have so many of them, but it's not the
Right.
same as spending money for the cymbal.
Well, that's the thing with the PST7s. It's like, wow, they're so cheap. What? And so I wind up collecting them, but I would never probably do that with the Caropes because they're just so darn expensive. But if you look back at the old Ludwig and Gretsch catalogs from the 50s, like a 22-inch K ride was $70. So you do the math and figure it forward, it's like a $500 cymbal
Oh
today.
yeah, definitely today, and
So
more than that. Some guys will pay for like a
yeah,
22-inch K.
oh,
Istanbul K. You'll get like two
yeah,
thousand dollars. It may sound like garbage, but
right. I was at Maxwell's on what this summer of 18, 19,
the one in
and
Chicago,
In New
oh, in New
York,
York,
and
yeah.
yeah, and it was like I was digging through this pile of old Ks and stuff, and I'm like, I can't believe what they're getting. I've got a 19.5-inch K, an old one from the 50s, and that's a nice cymbal. It's a bit washy, and it's a little bright actually. Um,
Hmm.
but I will use that a lot.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
depends
and
on the
did you get a
gig.
deal on it too? Because if you get an old K
Yeah.
with a deal, that's always the best. Okay.
Ready? You ready? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
135 $135.
That's a great deal on it. That's what I'm
That
saying.
was That
It's
was
when you steal them.
1992.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you my steal on a set of K's. My friend Scott Hazen has these cymbals. I gave them to him
Yeah.
because he's a real jazz drummer. Unlike me, I don't consider myself a jazz drummer, and the guys on YouTube think I'm a jazz drummer. I'm not. Okay, so I was really rocking on them in the '90s, and I realized I'm going to break these things if I keep
Yeah.
playing these things because I wanted to play them. They were old 14-inch Istanbul K's, and my
Oh, yeah.
friend, a worship leader I played a lot of gigs with, his father had them in a closet, and he goes, "Here, you can have these, but you can't sell them." That was his big thing. My friend David, and his son Zach is a great drummer. Plays in
Mm.
New York. He's played with all kinds of people in New York. He's even played with Sting, but that's another story, for another
Wow.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But his father and I are really good friends. He gave me these Istanbul K's,
Yeah.
and I got them for free. And what happened was
Nice.
my friend Scott I brought him down to his garage studio, and we're playing one night after work, and he goes to me, he goes, "Well, what can I give you for them?" I said, "Well, I can't sell them to you. It's got to stay in the family." This is where we started trading gear. I said, "But I'll take your 7-inch Noble Cooley, and we'll flip it. I think that'll be worth it."
Yeah.
And he flipped me this 7-inch Noble Cooley, and I had it for about
Wow.
5, 7 years. I actually did it on my wife's album. I used that Noble Cooley on that album a lot.
Oh, nice.
And one day he wanted the Noble Cooley back. Of course, I gave it back to him for some other drums, a phosphorus bronze Ludwig 602 that I had
Oh,
for
yeah.
years. So I traded that for my Black Beauty that everybody goes, what's that drum you got? That Ludwig Black Beauty. But
Yeah.
another friend I trade with. But that those were I got them for free, and they just fell in my lap. And I know he could probably get 3 grand, two or 3 grand for those stupid cymbals. And they're just a very
Yeah.
unique sounding cymbal set. I mean,
And you're right. There's a lot of old Ks that are not good.
yeah,
Um, there's some that are unbelievable. But today you got Istanbul, you've got Karop, you've got Bosphorus, you've got Paiste, and then you got a few boutique makers, and you can pick up wonderful, like the best jazz ride you'd ever want, for
yeah, I
under,
agree. Yeah,
$500 or whatever. So why even bother at this point? I mean, yeah, if you find one, cool, but I'm not going to go to Maxwell's and pay 2 grand for a 22-inch old K
no,
unless it was Mel Lewis's, maybe, because I did hear a 22-inch Mel Lewis uh, owned. Kenny Washington was playing at the Jazz Showcase in Chicago, and this would have been in the early '90s also. And this ride, went with a bass player friend, and she looks at me and she goes, "That ride," and I said, "I know." And I went up and talked to Kenny, and he goes, "Yeah, that belongs to Mel Lewis. He's got a whole closet full of these." And every time I see Mel, he goes, "You still got my symbol? I want that back sometime." He goes, "Yeah, yeah, I'll get it to you." And probably never did, but
no, he never did. I'm sure he never did. Just like John Riley had a bunch of Mel stuff too. Yeah,
yeah. I
and
saw John Riley play with the Vanguard band back that summer a couple years ago when I went to New York with my wife. And we got there on a Monday. I say, "Honey, it's Monday. We're going to the Vanguard because they
right.
play there every Monday night." And Riley was playing it, and he's really got the Mel thing together.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, he had it heavily together. I saw him with the Vanguard Orchestra right after Mel died, and that's when my wife
yeah.
interviewed John Riley
Oh,
for Modern Drummers for the portrait article, not the cover article, the one that was portraits back in the '90s, the
okay.
first one. And
Yeah.
he's a really nice guy. But the last time
Yeah.
I went to the Vanguard, I saw Bill Stewart playing with his
Oh,
trio. Yeah, that was pretty wild. That was 2014, I guess it was, when we were in
I
the city.
I have a lot of almost great gigs, and one of them was, believe it or not, I told you about Ron Kieser, my percussion teacher in college. Well, he knew that I needed something more. And a bunch of us went up to this thing called the Jazz Party. And this is back in the day. All these old great jazz artists were playing Sunday afternoon matinees and like Saturday night concerts at ballrooms and stuff. And Mel Lewis was on one of those. And he said, "We got to hook you up with Mel Lewis." And I'm like, yeah, yeah. What do you mean? He goes, like, you need to go there to New York and be his understudy. And I'm like, Really? What? He goes, yeah, he's looking for someone. And so we went up and met Mel, and Mel's very like, oh yeah, good to meet you, kind of very standoffish.
Yeah, he was.
But
He could
he
be.
was they were trying to groom me to go and be Mel's understudy. And I said, well, what does that mean? And to be like, well, you would like be at the rehearsals, maybe even play some of the rehearsals, set up his drums, go on the road and do this stuff. Well, it was like all in the works, and a few weeks later I said, hey, is this, how's this? Because I was getting excited about this possibility. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm in touch with his people. And then, a month went by or something. I said, so is this going to happen or what's this deal? Well, Mel's getting sick and he's really not doing a lot of traveling. So it just kind of fell through.
Right.
Um, but I mean, if I was playing well in 1985, John Riley was still, head and shoulders way above what my concept was. I mean,
Yeah.
the reality is there's no way I would have ever been groomed for that band, but it was
Well,
a pipe dream,
but you you
So I
you
mean,
you, you touched
they
some
tried.
guys. Somebody heard you
Yeah,
and heard something in what you were
yeah,
doing. So, and I
yeah.
mean,
There was,
when you get near a guy like Mel Lewis, it kind of rubs off on you in a different way, and it
yeah.
definitely rubbed off on, um, John Riley. John
Oh
Riley's
yeah,
playing.
yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
did.
He's
He was
fantastic.
heavily influenced by that, and he could have
Yeah,
he could have went funk or fusion if he wanted to, but he stayed in the traditional
yeah.
big band thing, and he's done
You
a lot
know,
of
you
it.
know what's, what's always really humbling for me, and I've always tried to keep my head, down like it needs to be,
Right.
because that's the way you're going to work with people. And music is communication and it is a language. And if you go in there with your ego speaking rather than your musicality, you're not going to be very wanted. And I think for me, it's very humbling to see us doing drum covers. It's like, hey, I'm going to play this Total cover, or I'm going to do this whatever Jeff Beck cover or whatever, and we do it, and it's like, yeah, it sounds pretty nice, but that was done 42 years ago, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And if you think about, I know where I was at 40 years ago, it's like, and even 30 years ago, and it's like, those people were so good and
They were.
so high level. It's humbling to even be able to know that.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I've been picking apart studio drummers for the last 4 years on YouTube. That's what I do. Like if I'm playing a Bernard cover or Roger
Right.
Hawkins. Like when he died last month,
Yeah.
I did a whole
Right.
bunch of Roger Hawkins stuff. Roger Hawkins wasn't a technical player at all, but
No.
it was all feel and pocket. I mean, it's like it's how do you teach feel and pocket other than listen and listen and listen. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm like 45 years of listening. Yeah, I hear things that other guys don't hear. And
Right.
that's the difference. But we go to YouTube or we go to Instagram and we see a kid playing, a million notes in
Yeah.
5 seconds, and it's like he's the greatest drummer in the world. I'm going, well, you might think so, but let me hear him play with a
Yeah.
song because that's all I want to hear.
Yeah.
If I hear him play with a song and he can groove, that's a different ball game. But if it's
You know,
chops all over the place, because I had no taste at 20 years old.
of
I
course.
remember I went on a gig once and we were playing a polka, and I was working with a guy that was a keyboard player, but he also played drums. And we're playing this polka, roll out the barrel, and I started working on my double stroke roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he turned around and goes, "Don't practice on my gig. Turn
Yeah.
go don't practice on my gig." It was like I was bored. This is a
Yeah.
boring thing.
Right.
You play roll
Oh
out the
yeah.
barrels. There's nothing more boring than playing a polka. But you want to know something? If you can lock a
Now
polka down and stay in it, that takes a certain level of professionalism,
it
musicality,
does.
and if you're really locked with the bass player and what's going
Yeah.
on, didn't hear it at
I
20, but I'm getting it
oh,
now.
yeah, I didn't hear it at 16. I mean, it's like I
Yeah.
was so immature. I would be on a gig and I'd be like, "Oh, this is boring and I can do it and I'm going to get paid, but this is boring." Um, but looking back at it now, if I did that same gig, I'd be really listening with different ears and playing with a different mindset and a different purpose, and I would really be putting the music forward rather than my own interests. I remember being on this wedding gig, and like I had mentioned in a video, we played polkas, waltzes, and we played old swing tunes, country tunes, and rock and roll. We did it all.
Right.
I remember, and this is the time I was working out of Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer by Jim Chapin. So we're playing like Mac the Knife, you know,
Right.
oh, when the shark bites, and it's ting, jang, ding, jang, and I'm like doing all these exercises 1 through 12 in Chapin, da 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 da, and I'm like, they didn't like turn around and say don't practice, but I literally was bored, and I was
Yeah.
using that time in my stupidity and immaturity, that I was using it as practice time rather than a gig time. Looking back, I'd never do that now. Of course, I would be like playing it for the feel, but
Right.
when you're young, that's the difference between a seasoned drummer and one that's not. I just watched a Woody Herman video, um, 1984, and the drummer he had, David Miller. He was a good drummer, and he
Hmm.
played ambidextrously or open-handed.
Right.
Wrote on his left. Great drummer. But then I looked for another video, and I saw a video with Jim Rupp playing, and I'm like going, there's the difference.
Oh
Jim
yeah.
Rupp was incredibly seasoned in 1985,
Yeah.
and David sounded like he was proving something.
Yeah.
And I would have definitely been trying to prove something too, um, if I were on that kind of a situation. And yeah, I just heard an interview with Duffy Jackson about that. Um, trying
Yeah.
to prove yourself. You don't need to. If you're playing right, you don't need to prove yourself. You're playing the music, and that'll take care of it.
I heard something. I read something from Peter Erskine back in '87 in Modern Drummer, where he said he was always trying to throw something on every session he did, and he was like the happening guy in New
Yeah,
York for a while there. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh
But
yeah,
when you listen to him playing with the fire he had with Maynard, I loved the way he played with Maynard back in the
yeah,
day. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh,
But
certainly.
but he was definitely trying to prove something. And when you're young, that's part of being young is trying to
Yeah.
prove you can do it.
I I
You
listened to
know?
recording. I did a lot of recording of myself, and I've got recordings from 84, 85, and I'm like, wow, you had some nice chops there, but that was totally unnecessary.
Yeah, right.
And I would approach those same songs completely differently today. But at the time, it's like I want to use everything I've got, and I want to be really energetic and really show a lot of flash. And I just wouldn't play that way anymore. Maybe it's partly just you get lazy, but I think it's you get more musical. Yeah,
Yeah, I think you do lose something when you start focusing on the musical side. I don't feel like I have any chops, so that's why I'm practicing these things now like that, and I'm realizing, well, I do have some chops, but I don't have the kind of chops kids have today. And I just when I have to throw down like a gospel thing, can't
right.
do it. But I could lay in an R&B thing and just sit there in the pocket and make it happen. Even a
Well,
complex one, but it's
there
throwing
you
all the stuff
go.
in.
Would 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 Roger Hawkins wasn't a chops player. Mel Lewis was not a chops player.
No,
Nick Ceroli was not a chops player, and neither was Bernard. But their pocket and groove was incredible.
yeah,
I mean, it'd probably be argued that Jeff Porcaro was not a chops player either. He said he hates solos.
yeah.
He hates solos. He's a
But
groove player.
he was so musical in the stuff he did, and
So
he had
musical.
some chops because he did some crazy things too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they come out in some of his really tasty fills.
Yeah,
But yeah, I look at some of these Instagram folks, and these 3-year-old drummers that are whatever, and it's like, well, that's cool, but how will they play with a band when they're 20? Do you remember? It was about 1978. Buddy Rich and this guy by the name of Eric Thompson had a drum battle on television,
hmm.
and Eric was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and
Oh
I've got
wow,
a cassette recording of that still.
do you? Wow,
And it might be available on YouTube. I don't know. But
Eric
anyway,
Thompson, huh?
I'm like, whatever happened to Eric Thompson? Well, I did look him up, and I believe he's teaching at some university in Iowa now. But I was like, well, this is going to be the next guy. And on all these
Yeah,
years went by and never heard of him. And he's probably like a lot of people, a gigging professional musician and a teacher, but he didn't become the next Buddy Rich.
yeah.
And these kids that are 3 years old that are doing that probably are not going to become the next Buddy Rich.
Now, Buddy Rich became not the nobody wanted to even try to be Buddy Rich at a certain point, right? He became passe.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
crazy.
there's that thing where, there's somebody on YouTube, and I won't mention their name, but he plays like Vinny, and he's great. And you
Hmm.
probably know who I'm talking about. But, there's a point where you got to be yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you sound like somebody trying to be Vinny or Steve Gadd or whoever.
Right.
And we all went through those phases. I went through the phase of trying to be Buddy Rich. I went through the phase of trying to be, Steve Gadd to a degree or Bonham. But, you know, again, you got to play what the music demands, what's
Right.
called for.
Well, that's the key, and it's becoming a musician and becoming musical, and that's what's going to be a lasting, long-term career versus somebody that's, because they as they say, when you get one of these high-level gigs, half of it is your playing, and the other half is your personality. You know what I mean?
Yes,
So
the hang. Yeah,
Buddy Rich, like Blake Nunn is basically saying to us, hi Blake. He says Buddy Rich was known for being a giant jerk, and you know what? You're correct. He was. But Buddy Rich owned the band, and Buddy Rich
right,
played with his band, and that's didn't really matter. Buddy Rich could be a giant jerk, but the rest of us who had wanted gigs, we could not be giant jerks and keep the gig
right.
because
No,
you were an egomaniac, and it was you're trying to take over, like be the show. You're nobody. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And you know you're not
yeah,
going to be invited back.
yeah. You
So yeah, go
can't
for
be a
it.
jerk. If you're a jerk, you're not going to work, at all. And even Buddy, you know, that he did one thing essentially, and he did it incredibly well. And he
Yeah.
had chops that would, I guess, they would probably cross um, uh, genres to a degree. But he did what he did, and he had music written for him. We don't have
Yes.
that luxury. Nobody has that luxury except Buddy Rich.
Exactly.
Um, they do one thing and they do it incredibly well. So the rest of us have to try and make it doing as much as my whole goal was always to um, be able to play all styles authentically and fit in a situation and make it comfortable. Even if I'm not playing a strictly perfect, Latin cascara or whatever, it can be convincing enough and comfortable and groove that that's what I want to do. Even Steve Gadd, I mean, his Latin drumming wasn't really Latin; it was Latin
No.
influenced, but it
Right.
became Steve Gadd, and Steve Gadd made it feel comfortable for everyone,
Yeah.
and it worked.
Yeah. I mean, I live down here in South Florida, and trust me, I know Latin players, and I can't play
Yeah,
Latin music like these guys.
yeah.
This is not going to
No, I
happen.
know.
No matter
Every
what, I
time
don't.
I,
Yeah, it's it's another world, isn't it?
yeah. You're in Fort Lauderdale, is it?
I'm in West Palm Beach, right above Fort
West Palm
Lauderdale.
Beach.
Yeah,
Okay,
I used to live close to Fort Lauderdale too, so I know that area. But
okay.
yeah, it's pretty wild. Well, welcome to everybody who's on. Double Deuce Drums and Keith Scott Had to Go and Bill Moore. Thanks for being on today, and Dirks and Blake Nunn. Guys, lots of cool stuff. So let's end it with some more of equipment. You talked about PST
Yes,
sevens. You said you
yes.
had a Gretsch kit. What year Gretsch kit do you have?
It is a 2018
Oh wow,
um, Gretsch uh, Catalina Club, and it's all mahogany,
it's a
and it's
great kit.
fantastic sounding drums. I would show you one, but they're up in the car because I'm going to a
Sure.
party soon or
Yeah.
this afternoon, and they're fantastic. I love the way they sound. I got it for $400 for for the four-piece kit used. And the only thing I did to them is I took them apart and I applied shellac on the inside of the shells because they didn't appear to have anything on them.
Hmm.
And like no sealer, even. I may be wrong. They may have used a sealer that you just couldn't see, but I wanted to make sure that they were a little bit more weather um, resistant,
Right.
because I want them to last. Uh, I ordered a 10-inch 7 by 10 for it in February, and it finally came at the end of April. And so now it's got 5 drums and 18-inch bass drum, 14, 12, 10, and the
Hmm.
snare drum. And the snare drum sounds really pretty nice. I've never been a huge Gretsch snare drum fan,
Neither have I,
but
by the way.
this, yeah, everybody's like that. They're coming into their own now, I think. But this drum sounds like it should for a jazz snare drum. I had a 6.5-inch Gretsch from the '60s, round badge, that somebody sold me, I think, or I finally sold it to a dude when I worked in Ohio because I'm like, I can't get this to sound good.
I had one
It
of
sounded
those.
it sounded raspy. I thought it sounded raspy and thin. I just didn't like it. And it was a beautiful blue sparkle. When Gretsch was Gretsch, you bought a Gretsch drum, you didn't have like 7 different lines of Gretsch drums. It was a Gretsch drum,
I know.
and
That's
never
my
really
drums.
liked it. And
Yeah.
and so I've always been a Ludwig snare drum guy. I've
Yeah.
got this. I got the 5. I've got the Gretsch, and I've got this Yamaha. Um, this is the Maple Custom Absolute series from 1999.
Nice.
That is a nice drum. I had to fix it though because it went out of round because I noticed I was tuning tighter, I was tuning higher, and I noticed my rim was bending down at one lug point, and it's like I changed heads is when I discovered this. I'm like, I can't get it in tune. I measured it and it was out of round, and I'm like, oh, the shell's
Wow.
out of round. So what I did is I stretched the shell using a long threaded rod and put nuts on it, and I basically stretched it into round. And then I installed reinforcement hoops inside that I bought
Wow.
from Precision Drum Company. I glued them in place, let it set, took off the clamps, stayed round, beveled those reinforcement hoops to match the rest of the shell, and it made that drum. It cranked. I mean, it went up another 30% in its qualities. I mean, the crispness and everything. It was amazing. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. Otherwise, it was
That's
unusable.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I thought Yamaha drums never went out of round. That was their big
Yeah,
thing. I'm
this one
surprised you
did.
didn't send it back because I think there's like some kind of guarantee on that or something.
Well, that's 20 years ago or more.
Yeah,
So,
but
and I got
it,
that set directly from Yamaha because at the time our store that I worked for was Yamaha dealer, and they had a deal. You had to sign off with the owner of the store, and
right.
I could get the drums for 5% over cost. So I was like an endorser.
Yeah,
So I
nice.
got this beautiful kit for like $1,500 back in '99, and it was going for about $3,000, I think, at the time, list price. And I
That's
think common selling price was about $2,500, I think.
right. Yeah.
So it was a really good deal.
So in your other job, as
Yeah.
musical instrument repairman, do you
Yes.
ever have things that come in that you've picked up for yourself that somebody just left on the doorstep, didn't really want, didn't know what to do with, and or
Yes.
gotten deals from the music store because somebody dropped something in? Tell us one of your
Yeah.
great finds.
Let's see here. I don't know if it's a great find, but I'll show it to you. All right, here we are. Sorry, I'm giving you seasickness. Okay. This is a 15-inch snare drum, and it's a Gretsch 15
Wow.
by 8-inch deep. Now sorry,
Concert snare drum, hey?
it's like rock, rock and roll. Well, what it is it's an old 15-inch marching drum, and it was red sparkle, and I thought this is back in 1988, probably
Right.
89. I was working in Ohio at the time, and I said it'd be kind of cool to have like a really big rock and roll snare, and still has the Gretsch permatone head on it. So anyway, I decided I'm going to cut the shell down from whatever 10-inch or 12-inch deep, and I
Right.
cut it down to 8-inch, and then I put some stain on it and tongue oiled it, and put a Yamaha strainer on it because they were inexpensive at the time,
Right. Yeah.
and I don't even think it had the strainer on it. Um, in fact, it yeah, it probably, I mean, and those strainers weren't very good anyway. So that was like
Yeah.
15 bucks at the time for the strainer. So that's one I had. Uh, Occasionally there'll be something. I'm trying to think if there's something else. Yeah, once in a while there might be a piece of hardware or something that gets abandoned, or I'll buy from the store or whatever. But
Any symbols or
um,
anything?
no, I did have a 15-inch K, a old K that was in a trap case. You probably saw that video I did of that Tama Imperial Star
I
restoration.
did. Yeah.
And in that case were some old symbols, and I'm digging around and I find this old 15-inch K. And when the people came in, I told them about it. I said, I didn't clean this symbol because they're kind of an old jazz lover's symbol. And a lot of those guys like them dirty. So I'll clean it if you want, but otherwise we're just going to leave this. And they go, no, no, that's fine. Well, he's very sick. The
Yeah.
gentleman is very sick, and his wife decided to make a shadow box for that symbol. And then I wrote up a whole thing about K Zildjian symbols,
Oh wow.
and and so they're having this whole thing framed with my little write up and this symbol in this shadow box, and just going to display it.
Wow.
But now I haven't run across too many crazy things like that I can recall. I know a guy that he was a mechanic and he went to an army auction and tool sale in Columbus, Ohio, and you bid on the pallets. And he saw this pallet and he recognized two saxophone cases on it. And he opens up the case and he sees Mark 6 tenor in each case. And well,
Wow.
Mark 6 tenors now are going for, 5 to 7 grand.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he made a bid on that whole thing, and it also had some tools on it. He made a bid on that particular crate for $220, and God won the bid. And so he immediately sold one of those tenors for $2,000, and the other one he kept. So once in a while, there's crazy stuff you'll find, but no, I haven't. That $135 old K that I bought, that was on display up in our drum shop, and I just happened to walk up during a break, with a cup of coffee, and I'm like, "Oh, what's this? So it's an old K. Oh, let's see what this is all about." So I grabbed it, and I'm like, $135, I'll take it, and it
Yeah.
was. It's got a little edge crack, but it's never grown. I drilled it and separated it with a jeweler saw. You have to find the very end of the crack, though. And it's different oftentimes on the top than on the bottom. Sometimes they'll crack and you don't actually drill the end. And so you have to go and really examine it and do some measuring. And I found that if you can find the end of that crack and drill it, and I use a very small drill bit, very small, and then separate it, it works out. Let me see if I can get it. Let's see. That's not it. I got so many symbols around here. Let's see. Oh, here it is. This is a nice old K, but let's see. It's very faint. You can't. I keep dropping my phone. I'm so sorry. Um,
Live stream fun.
this is about 1,780 grams, so it's pretty light. I did put a piece of tape on it recently for some reason. Um,
Dry it out a little bit.
yeah,
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
there it
And it
is.
stopped it.
It did stop it, and I got this in '92, and that's and I've used it and played it pretty hard, but I know that
Oh, it's
probably doesn't mean anything on a microphone like this, but
yeah. Interesting. That's cool. Definitely cool.
yeah,
I mean, um, finding symbols, old symbols, are hard to do today. I mean, it used to be kind of fun to go out to the drum shops or the
yeah,
pawn shops and find them, but everybody seems to know what they're looking for now. So eBay has destroyed all of that. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
and
I
overpriced
just
everything.
I discovered your channel because Terry was talking about Pisces and stuff, And then I started looking up something about Paiste 505s, and then I saw you were having a discussion about all these symbols that you had. So this is
Yeah.
a few years ago, and I'm like, well, this is pretty cool, you know. And you're playing these different Paistes, and I'm like, yeah, they really sound nice. So I kind of become a bit of a Paiste guy, particularly. I think Paistes sit so well in the mix. They have something about their natural EQ and I think lack of complexity
Right.
that normally Zildjians have that work better on, not necessarily better, but on live gigs and acoustic music. I feel like the Zildjians give me a little bit more that I want. But again, I'll put up that 18-inch thin crash as an alternate ride and crash cymbal, and it's a beautiful complement to the darker Carope sound. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I found you talking about 505s.
Well, I got some 505s that I've
Yeah.
used, and I bought one. I have one of Danny Gottlieb's 505s. I bought it
Yeah, I
Maxwell
remember.
Drum Shot. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's part of it. But hi to everybody who just jumped on HLR. Haysteed Moore, thank you for being on, and Blake Nunn and Raphael, thanks for being on, and CCM Drummer and Double Deuce Drums and all you guys. We're going to wrap up because, as everybody knows, I do yoga at 11 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up in a second. But one last thing about, yeah, I know, I need to do it too, desperately. One last thing I want to say about Paiste and what you were saying there was that, yeah, they just sit in the mix a certain way, and I've grown to really love them. But you're right about the Zildjians, that there's something about in the complexity that
Yeah.
there's they work in certain in situations. Like I use my Zildjians at my church gig all the time. It works in that
Okay.
acoustic setting.
Mhm.
There's no
Yeah.
mics on it. It's a very acoustic gig. It's not a loud gig. The Cropes are not
No.
loud cymbals. The
No.
Cropes are extremely soft cymbals in actuality.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't realize how soft they were until I started trying to play them on, you know, on try to record them. They didn't record well. I mean, I just have no definition of that cymbal on
Yeah.
on a in a recording session. It just doesn't have anything. And then all of a sudden
Correct.
you take it out on a gig in an acoustic room, and it kind of goes out there and it
Ah.
sounds fine. It's
Yeah.
got that yeah. I mean, it's 22 is a beautiful cymbal, but I need a different ride cymbal to play my Zildjians, because I have some really nice Zildjians. I've got some Armands that I've,
Hmm.
an 18 Armand. I got a beautiful 19-inch beautiful baby Armand that a friend gave me, Mike Fasano gave me. That I love
Well,
that
and
cymbal. It's a beautiful cymbal. It
and
works.
I commented on one of your videos. I think it was the Diane Krall song that you did, and you're using a 2002, and I'm like, that works surprisingly well. It
Yeah.
sounded nice. And of
It's
course, if for Paiste, here's how I got into Paiste. Um, at the store I work at, Eddie Clift
Oh
was
yeah, I
our.
know Ed
He's like,
Cliff.
you know
I
him?
know Ed.
Okay,
Yeah, my
yeah. So,
splash cymbal I bought from Ed Cliff. He was at my studio one day about 3 years
oh,
ago. He's a great
yeah,
guy.
yeah. And Ed, he got into aviation because I'd been flying. I got my pilot's license in I think 98,
Yeah,
99,
yeah.
99, spring of 99, and then Ed, he talked his wife into letting him buy a Piper Dakota, which is got a pretty good hauling capacity. So he would fly and do his sales route using his airplane, and he logged thousands of hours, and I was so jealous that he could do that. But anyway, he introduced the new traditional series line at our store one time, and he had a 22-inch ride and a 20-inch ride, and I played them both. And I had a trio that I was rehearsing with regularly, and I said, "Yeah, I want to play these with you guys." And I'm playing them, and I'm like, "These are the thing." I never was convinced that the new K's back in 1982, 83 were at
The
all
real
a
K's.
representation of what K's were ever.
Yeah,
And I had one, and I never really cared for it that much. Traded it for an Istanbul ride, early 90s, which is a little better, but still not that thing.
yeah.
Istanbul has gotten better, I think, in that original traditional sound. Anyway, the traditional series, I'm like, finally somebody's doing the old K sound, and it was Paiste. And I bought the 22. The 20 was a little too splashy for me, and a little bit too much overtone. So I got the 22, and that was the most at that time the most I had ever paid for a cymbal, and it was about
400 something bucks.
oh, the stamp is still underneath the cup, the store stamp.
Yeah.
I didn't pay that because I got a discount, but it was still a lot of money. It was like 300 and something, and it was like wow. But it's a great cymbal. Um, but that kind of got me tuned into the Paiste world way back in '99, 2000 somewhere. Actually, I think I got that in '98. It was, and
So you got the
then
script logo on it, hey? You got the one that's
got
got the
yeah,
the script
and
on it, yeah.
no ink. There's no ink on it, which always kind of bummed me out because I thought, well, wouldn't that be cool? But no, it's a
No ink
script
on the
engraved.
bottom, even on the bottom. Does it got the
No, no.
Paiste logo on the bottom? So you got one of the real early ones then.
Yeah, yeah. It
Because
was it
I've
was
got
the first.
I got an 18 traditional flat ride that
Yeah,
my friend Alan Levine gave me, and
yeah,
it has the Paiste logo and the hollow logo on the bottom, and then it's
yeah,
got the script on the top. It's a
yeah.
beautiful flat ride. I played it on a Steely Dan tune, one of my Steely Dan covers. I think it was Ricky Don't Lose That Number. I put that flat ride on
Okay.
it. But
Yeah,
the traditionals, I love the traditionals, and they stopped making them when I started getting into the Paistes. And then when you
yeah,
find them now, they're so expensive. They're so out
yeah,
there, you know.
yeah.
And
Well,
the other problem with the traditionals that I've had problems with because I have a 16 thin, extra thin traditional, is they
yeah.
bend. And I noticed a lot of
Oh,
guys. Have you had any problems with it bending at all? Or you just don't play it very hard? You just play it on jazz gigs.
not that 22. No, no. I've
Yeah,
I've never really had to light into that so heavily. It just wouldn't be
yeah,
something I'd use on a
too
rock
much.
gig. I did try it once on a more R&B gig, and it was just too dark. Um, yeah,
Yeah, my wife is talking to me, telling me you got yoga class right now. So
yeah.
yeah,
This has been a lot of fun, man.
I know there's gonna be four of us. We should do it in the veranda on the veranda. So anyhow, I'm talking about my back deck that we just put in the veranda.
Yes.
But this has been excellent, and I think we can go another hour on Feisty
Oh,
Symbols right now. We're not. We
well,
just
maybe.
scratched it. I'll bring you
Yeah,
back for
maybe.
another show. We'll do it now, especially now that you got your microphone figured out. And
Yeah.
well,
Well, we
that
figure
was
these things out as we go. This is the first time
uh,
I've ever done this, so.
I know, but this was a lot of fun. We need to do this again,
Well,
and definitely
thank you, Earl, for all you've done for the drumming community. Like I say, you're a great personality, a really sweet guy, and I think you're very accessible, and you make this whole world accessible. I really appreciate what you do.
thank you.
So keep on keeping on for sure.
Definitely. And you
Yeah,
too, Jim. And by the way, you've been around a long time. You've been at this for a while, but I really appreciate what you bring to the community, and I appreciate your playing. And I think more guys
thanks.
need to know you. So hopefully the younger guys are on here will check out Jim Flies too.
Yeah,
The Flies is about
I
your plane, right? So
no, it's yeah, my airplanes.
your airplanes.
Yeah, when I first came out with that moniker, and I probably should just change it to like, something
Nah,
really easy. But whatever. I thought I'd do stuff with aviation, but I kind of set that aside because of raising kids and money, uh, whatever. But I've been starting to tell more stories. I've got a cool video that's going to drop tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Central, and
look forward to that.
that's a fun one. It's a little bit of an homage to Duffy Jackson. I just found out he passed
Passed
away
away, yeah.
March 3rd. I did not know that. I was so bummed when I heard that just
Yeah.
the other day. Um, anyway, yeah. So I'm trying to do a combination of things. It seems like the repair videos get a lot of attention, and you know, I don't want to abandon that. The drum videos, I'll get 120 or 500 views or something on a cover. Actually, I've got 455,000 views on that silly one I did with what would they sound like if they played Rose, Africa by Toto. And I got
Yeah.
all these drummers that I mimic. And of course, it's not very locked. And I'll be honest with you, I know that, but that's like the main comment, negative comment. It's like, well, you're not in time. Rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, I know. First of
That's the
all,
point.
try playing that song along with no drums, because I was using
Drumless
uh,
track.
Guitar Hero or something,
Yeah.
and the bass is gunk 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 gunk. It's hard. It's really
It was
hard.
so hard to play with that track that I actually built a percussion track that I played
Oh,
it
you
around,
did.
and it's out there on YouTube as me just playing percussion. So you can play that track with me if you want.
Okay.
If you find
Okay.
Africa Earl drum percussion, and I've got playing djembe and shakers and gong and all kinds of stuff. But
Well,
I
what's
know I'm going to be in
hilarious is
trouble in a minute. My wife's going to
okay.
scream at me.
All
I
right.
got that. But
Yeah. You got to go. We could do this forever.
we could go for another
You,
25 minutes easy. Guys, I love all my
thanks.
fans and all the friends and
Yep.
subscribers. And Jim, thank you for being on the show. Thank you so much,
God bless
brother.
you, brother.
Let's stay in touch in the
We'll
real
do.
world. Okay.
We'll do. We'll do.
All right.
We
Talk
got
to you soon.
got my phone. All right. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye.